What's up, guys? Toad back with you as usual. 2-5 night last night. It looked like it was guaranteed to be 3-4, which at least I would have more easily taken. I was going to go 3-2 in college basketball. I mean, the NBA play, whatever. Clippers, not even close. I mean, they did not even really show up. That line moved against me throughout the day. I'm like, yeah, I'm fucked with this one. The other ones I still kind of liked the way the market shaped up on pretty much all the other ones. The hockey game just didn't get there. I mean, Anaheim got outplayed, but they were still in the game into the third period. They're only down 2-1. So you have a decent sized underdog like that at home. There's a shot, at least at that point, but that was not to be. And then college basketball, just insanely frustrating with North Carolina. They did not have a good game at all. Some of my leans hit too, like Creighton hit. I think Iowa State, Duke. I think I had a lean on Duke. So the big games that I talked about pretty much all kind of went the way that I thought, except the North Carolina one. So that really pissed me off as well. Furman barely got there. That one, I don't know what you can think about that. I haven't really looked into the box score there. I know they won by 3 as a -2.5. So I don't know if I got a little bit lucky on that one or not. I think they were winning most of the game, though. Lehigh was a complete blowout win. And then Minnesota, that was just bad. That didn't get there. What happened? And Minnesota did not play very good defense there. But then what happened in the night game? I was like sitting there. I'm like, this is a win. USC guaranteed to be a 3-4 night, so a small loss. So I'll take it. USC +6. They were winning the game outright against Oregon. I thought Oregon was in a bad spot. USC was handling them, beating them for most of the game, winning the game outright into the second half. I checked the score. It was still USC was winning the game, I think by 4 or 6 with like 4 minutes left in the game. I'm like, all right, they're going to cover a +6 here. They're not going to get outscored by 12 points in the final 4 minutes of the game. No, that's exactly what happened. They got outscored by, I think, 15 points from then on. It got to a point where they lost the lead, and then you get into dangerous territory because you wind up getting into the spot where you intentionally foul, and you got a team at +6. They're going to keep fouling until they're down 7. So that's the one situation you can't get into, and they wind up losing, I think, by 8. It's just so bad. Probably unintentional fouls. I didn't even see it, but USC had the lead the whole game. That was such a bad beat. It was ridiculous. That absolutely should have gotten there. I can't even believe it, man. +6, and they're winning the game outright the whole game. I'm pissed, and now I'm down to a point because of yesterday. I'm down where now I'm only slightly above the break-even point again this year. This has been a lost year for me, man. I got to make sure that I at least still have a slightly winning year. I mean, I had really good years the last 2 years. This year has been awful. I mean, you have ups and downs here. Usually you don't have that bad a year, though. I mean, I guess it could be worse. It could be a losing year, which I've had once in my life. But let's move on to today. I feel pretty confident about this. We got kind of a smaller Thursday slate, so it actually, in a way, makes it easier to focus. Maybe I'm not being selective enough still. I don't know. But I got 3 basketball plays, which I think are kind of backed up by the market mostly and the situation. I like all 3. I got an NBA play where I'm going back to the well, and 2 hockey plays where the market doesn't look like it's agreeing with me right now, but I like the situations. They just lead me to those plays. And NBA and NHL, I'm playing teams that seem like I play all the time. All right, let's go to, am I sharing my screen? Yeah, I am. All right, let's go to college basketball here. We'll start this out. We'll just start out with the banger right away. It's a game I'd probably talk about even if I wasn't playing it. Penn State -2 is going to be the first play I have on the board here at 6:30 after we get some ugly afternoon games out of the way here. This is number 8 Purdue at unranked Penn State. And you know, man, this sets up one of those situations, even though, I don't know, I didn't see what Mississippi State did yesterday, actually. I don't know if they won and covered in the spot or not, but this is a much smaller number to have to cover here. So this is one of those situations that was big-time moneymaker last year where you had a ranked road underdog against an unranked home opponent, and the unranked home opponent did very, very well for most of the season last year. I know the books do have to adjust a little bit to account for that, and it seemed like they really over-adjusted the Mississippi State line. In this game, I don't think it's that over-adjusted. Ken Baum has Purdue as the better team. He has them, I think, in like the teens, and he has Penn State really flying under the radar. I think he has them like in the 20s. So Penn State, pretty good team. So he has this game close. He's got Purdue, I think, with a 1-point win in this game. So if it's kind of in that anywhere in kind of that pick 'em range, I think it's still kind of good to go, especially still early in the season. You don't want to just blindly follow Ken Palm's rankings at the very least. You got to take into account everything. So this is a small enough number, and I like the tempo contrast. I like how this sets up, man. I like how the market looks. I'm going to lay the points with Penn State in this one. I think the situation also calls for it. Penn State's up from a pick 'em to -2 with juice. Obviously, I would rather have had the pick 'em. I mean, you could probably find a nice money line on this too if you wanted to. Probably Penn State -130 or so. You might be able to find out there. I wouldn't mind playing it that way too. So they just have to win the game outright. Winning by a bucket, I'm going to go with anyway because Penn State is the faster team. So hopefully they're able to do that. It looks like it's moving up further. 75% of the tickets and 86% of the cash on Penn State for now. But this is early morning percentages here. I think once this plays out, the public is going to be coming in on Purdue. I mean, you got the number 8 ranked team, the team that made the Final Four last year. We know they don't have Zach Edey anymore, but they still have some of those guards that they had there last year. Experienced Purdue team. I mean, they're the ranked team. The public is going to be coming in on Purdue, especially seeing, oh my God, I get Purdue as an underdog. Why wouldn't I do that? Well, like I said, Penn State, pretty good team, and I think they're flying under the radar here. And I think Purdue is somewhat overranked. So I think because of all of that, the odds makers can't really skew the line that much to account for this ranked versus unranked scenario here. Purdue, they're coming off a nice win, man. I mean, they had another ranked win over Ole Miss. Ole Miss, as I pointed out, they beat me the other night. They've started to play better. That's a big win for Purdue, and that was actually the championship in the Rady Children's Invitational early season tournament there in San Diego. So big win for Purdue. Now they're having to go all the way to Pennsylvania off of that from San Diego. Although, of course, they do have time off between the two. But I think coming off of that, I don't think it's a good situation, man, for Purdue to have a bunch of time off here and have to travel like that and only play their second true road game or their first true road game. I think I won on this one, actually. I think I played Marquette in that game. That was an easy win for Marquette in that one. So Purdue has not shown an ability to win on the road yet, although I know they're going to be a little bit more used to playing on the road now because they did once, but still, it doesn't look that great for them. It's still going to be a hostile environment here, and Penn State's going to be waiting for them. I think they're in a letdown spot off of that nice win, winning that tournament there, having to go Pacific Coast to East Coast here, and I think having that extra time off might disrupt their momentum a little bit because when you're winning, you just want to keep playing, man. So I think all of that being taken into account. Are they going to overlook Penn State? Because Penn State's sitting at 7-1. No, I don't think they're going to overlook them. But I just think Penn State is going to catch them in a decent spot here. And Penn State, yeah, they faced a weaker schedule. They got wins against Virginia Tech and then a win against Virginia Tech, I should say. Pretty nice one, actually. But Virginia Tech's not that good this year. And a loss to Clemson by 8. Clemson, as we see, they're pretty good, man. I mean, they beat Kentucky the other night. This Clemson team is not bad. And Penn State, they were able to bounce back and get a win over Buffalo. So they got momentum again here. So they're not coming off that loss, which was one of those early season tournaments. So they had a game after that, and they played more recently. So I like how the situation sets up for Penn State, man, because they've been sitting at home, and they had a game on Sunday, and they got to play, and it was an easy game, a nice win to kind of get that those losing thoughts out of their mind there. Taste victory again. Use that to propel you forward. I think that's kind of a momentum starting win there. And this is going to be one of their biggest games they have, man. I mean, I know they're going to have Big Ten play coming up. I mean, this is a Big Ten game as well. This is to kick off the Big Ten season. This is their Big Ten home opener. So I think it's going to be a wild atmosphere here with a really good team like Purdue coming into their place. Penn State's going to want them, man. I mean, Purdue's going to have a target on their back because of how good they've been recently. So give me Penn State for all those reasons. And like I said, this is a pacing contrast. So you get Purdue, who likes to play very slow. Penn State likes to play very fast. And usually, like I say, even if you're the lesser team, although Penn State isn't really that much of the lesser team, the home team usually can win out in the battle of the pacing. So Penn State is going to try to push up tempo here, try to throw Purdue out of their preferred pace. Purdue likes to play the half court, man. Find good shots. That way, Penn State is going to want to run and completely throw them out of their rhythm and element, and I think they may be able to do that here. So this tempo contrast where I think it typically will favor the home team. So I like that as an added way to look at this game as well for Penn State. So give me Penn State -2. I don't know if I'm going to talk about any of these other games today. Actually, I think it's really just going to be my plays because there really aren't any other like huge games, I don't think, today. I mean, I'm going to mention a couple other games quickly. But next game, actually, the next game up here that I see here is going to be a play as well. Samford -7.5. I'm laying the points with Samford in this one. I think this is a fade spot for South Carolina State for sure. This line's up from 6 to 8 with juice. I mean, obviously, I would have rather had the 6. I didn't see any 6s out there. There's not a huge difference between 7.5 and 8, so I would just try to find the best number out of those and lay it. I mean, I think this is a big mismatch between these two teams. Samford is the way better team, and also I think you're getting the benefit of the situation here. It does look like the line is moving up on Samford as well. This is not really a pacing contrast. Both teams like to play a little bit on the faster side. Samford a little bit faster than South Carolina State does, but Samford is so much the better team that I'm not even sure it really matters. South Carolina State, look at what they're coming off of, man. They just played Xavier to within 3 points on the road as a 26.5-point underdog. South Carolina State somehow was able to make a comeback, too. They were down 13 points with 5 minutes left. They came all the way back to within 1. I mean, this is a huge effort for South Carolina State. Coming off of a game like this, I don't know if they're going to have anything left, man. In Xavier's place, Xavier shot particularly poorly from 3 in the game, 27.8% from 3. So Xavier had an off 3-point shooting night. South Carolina State, that was like game of the year, like effort of the year type of material there. When you have a much lesser team like that, a MEAC team in this case, coming off a game of the year type of situation like that, that was probably the biggest opponent they'll face all year, a ranked Xavier team. And I think they played well enough. They actually knocked Xavier out of the rankings, even though Xavier still won. I mean, that's win of the year type of stuff, man. Even though I know Samford is good, but still, I don't see South Carolina State being able to put in another big effort like this in a row right after that. A couple days later, I don't like how this sets up for them. And they do have an in-state battle up next. They have 3 in-state rivals up next, actually, with Charleston Southern and then a little bit of a break, and then Furman and South Carolina Upstate. Furman probably the one of those teams we'll pay more attention to, though. So those are 3 South Carolina games coming up next. So I don't know if they're going to look ahead or not, because Samford is a good team. So I don't necessarily know they're going to overlook Samford. But even so, this South Carolina State team, they're not good. This is a mismatch, and they're in a bad situation here. They've only won one. Actually, I don't think they've won any games at home yet in Division I, although most of their games have been on the road. All of these are road, neutral site games. So I think this is actually their Division I home opener, but I don't even think that's going to help that much. I think that Xavier game is just such a big effort. It's going to take so much out of them that I just don't see this happening for them. Samford is the way better team, like I said, and better offensively. I mean, Samford can really shoot the ball. Maybe they're not as great defensively, although I think Samford is just the better all-around team in a game like this. Samford, I mean, they've had some days off, which I don't love. When you're rolling like this and you have days off, that's not that great because it can disrupt your momentum, but I think they're going to show up in this game, and they only have a game against Austin Peay up next, so I don't think that's going to really detract them. I don't think that's really going to pull their focus away. Samford, by the way, I believe they play in Alabama, so none of these are in-state games either here. They're coming off an easy win over West Georgia. So as long as this extra break doesn't hurt their momentum that much, they still kind of have the momentum here. Yes, I know they don't have any impressive wins. I mean, they played Michigan State to within 8, though, so that's pretty impressive there as well. The Samford team, not a bad team, and they're much, much better than South Carolina State, as the odds makers are telling you, although I think Ken Pom has this number somewhere around 6. So 7.5 is a little bit of a difference, but I mean, the situation, I think, just calls for it. I don't think South Carolina State's going to be able to put up another effort like that again coming off of that. So give me Samford, or take me Samford, lay me Samford -7.5. Emily, what's up? You're running away from me? Oh, all right. How dare you? Why does every woman run away from me? What the hell? All right. And then let's finish off talking about college basketball here before I got to talk about NBA, NHL, and the NFL game tonight. Let me see. There were a couple other games that I thought were maybe a little bit interesting. Jackson State, I would say, I would only look to fade them in this game. And I know it looks easy to do when they're an 0-8 team, but they faced a really difficult schedule. Jackson State. They faced Houston, High Point, Xavier, Vandy, Western Kentucky, Kentucky. Lipscomb's not even that bad. Lipscomb is the weakest opponent they faced, probably. And then St. Louis, not that bad either. So Jackson State, I mean, they're certainly battle tested. They faced a ridiculously difficult schedule. So now they're actually stepping down in class against Arkansas State. Although Arkansas State's not really that bad either. But this was a big game for Jackson State. Another big effort. 19.5-point underdog at St. Louis with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar there. And St. Louis was winning the game with 4.5 minutes. Jackson State was within. They were winning by 1, with 4:55 left. Jackson State was. So they were more than in this game. They were winning the game throughout the first half of it by double digits, too. So they had this game, and they blew it in a big, big game. So I expect Jackson State to be kind of not really in a great spot coming off of that. And another road game in a row here. Look how many road games they've played. Every game has been on the road so far. So just brutal schedule for Jackson State. I just don't see it happening. And Arkansas State likes to run and push the pace too. And they got Iowa State up next, which is going to be a very highly ranked opponent as well. This is a brutal, brutal schedule for Jackson State, man. So I would only look to lay the points with Arkansas State. Arkansas State's undefeated at home. I think this is a true home game for them. They're coming off a loss to Hofstra, where Arkansas State was actually a favorite by 6.5 out in the Bahamas. I don't really know why that line moved like that, where Hofstra was originally a 4.5-point favorite. I don't know if there were some major injuries there or what that was, or if Hofstra rested players for some reason, but Arkansas State coming up that loss, I think they're in a bounce-back spot. So even though they do have Memphis up next, could be a look ahead maybe, but I don't know. I mean, I guess you could debate that Arkansas State is actually in a sandwich spot here as well. If you want to say that Hofstra game was actually big because it was in that Bahamas tournament, I don't know. So I'm going to not play this game, but I would only look to lay it with Arkansas State in this one. They are down from 16 to 15, though. So those are my thoughts on that game. Xavier and TCU, of course, I would lean to Xavier because of, like I just said, Xavier coming off that game where they almost lost to South Carolina State. That's a pretty bad performance out of them, so I think they're going to bounce back. But this is their first true road game, so that is going to be somewhat difficult as well. And their biggest opponent, their best opponent they faced so far, Michigan, they lost pretty badly. So I don't know how good Xavier really is. Ken Pom, I think, has both these teams kind of in the 40-something range. Power ratings-wise, TCU also lost to Michigan. They faced a little bit more of a difficult schedule because Santa Clara is actually pretty good. Colorado State is okay. They're coming off that game. Kind of a tough game there for TCU. So I think the lean is to Xavier there, with TCU coming off a more difficult game where Xavier just almost got caught. So Xavier is going to be looking to bounce back here. But a game with a pick-em price like this, and Xavier is like a one-loss team or whatever, it almost looks too easy to take Xavier in a way with TCU at -1.5. So I'll stay away from it. And I think Ken Pom has TCU winning that game by about 3. My final play is right up here. UC Davis -2.5. Let's go right to it, and then I'll move over to the other sports here. This is a fade of Cal Poly. UC Davis is up from 2 to 2.5 with juice now. 67% of the tickets, 75% of the cash on UC Davis. So the market looks like it is indicating on the UC Davis side to me. And I'm going to fade Cal Poly in the spot, man. And both of these teams are teams that like to play pretty fast. So there's no huge tempo disparity here. I think Cal Poly likes to play a bit faster, but UC Davis, maybe they'll be able to play slightly slower into their pace. I mean, Cal Poly's been good so far, man, and they face a pretty difficult schedule. San Francisco, Cal, not easy games. Arizona State, St. Mary's. But look at what they're coming off of. They went to Stanford, who is one of the bigger brothers in the state of California. Even if they're not that good this year, they are still 6-2 and 5-1 at home, and their only home loss, or maybe this is their second home loss now. After this, maybe that was their record coming into this game, but Stanford was, not Samford, I almost said Samford again. Stanford was -15.5 in this game, and Cal Poly pulled off the big upset over big brother Stanford. Huge, huge game for Cal Poly. They did it by hitting a bunch of threes. They had a huge effort to come back in this game. They were losing most of the game, came back and won. They hit 40% of their threes. They hit 8 threes in the second half. maybe a little bit of an outlier situation there, hitting more threes than what you would normally expect. Stanford maybe shot a little bit less than what you would expect, 30.3%. Cal Poly, either way, I think that puts them in a letdown spot coming after this, going to UC Davis. I don't know if maybe Northridge will have more of their focus because they're sitting at a better record at 6-2. Davis is at a below 500 record, so maybe they'll overlook Davis here. This is Davis's first Division I home game, I believe. Their first actual home game, or it says they're 0-0 at home. Maybe they're not, actually. No, I think they are. Or no, 0-0 in conference. Never mind. So it is their second home game, excuse me. And they lost their first home game to Norfolk. But their schedule hasn't really been that easy either. They lost at Washington. They lost at Stanford. So public might come in and say, wait a minute, Cal Poly beat Stanford in Stanford, and UC Davis lost to them. So we're getting points with Cal Poly. Of course, that's easy. We're going to take Cal Poly, right? Again, it's not that easy, man. Every game's an individual situation. So, yeah, UC Davis lost to them. They beat Grand Canyon on the road, which is pretty impressive. Grand Canyon's pretty good. Norfolk State is actually not that bad this year. They're good even by their standards this year. I think usually they're good for the bad conference that they're in, but I think they're actually competitive with some other conferences this year too. And then Davis got blown out at Oregon State. I mean, Oregon State is one of the big boys, and Davis just couldn't handle them. They got blown out. Oregon State shot ridiculously against them, a 57.1 from three, 60.4 from the field. That is major outlier stuff. So that game, yeah, they lost badly, but that game, the score makes it look worse than it actually was at the very least. So Davis, coming off of that, I think they're in bounce back mode here. So I'm going to lay the points with UC Davis in that one. And that's college basketball. That'll wrap that up. Let's move over to hockey. What do we got in hockey here? Winnipeg, to me, it looks like Winnipeg would be the right side here, but they're down from minus 140 to minus 136. 90% of the tickets, 82% of the cash, so I just don't want to deal with it. But this Winnipeg team has started to kind of slide a little bit after they were dominating. They've lost 4 games in a row, but 3 of them to good teams. Kings, Vegas, Dallas, all on the road. You can kind of excuse all of that, and then they returned home. So a bad spot and a return home spot. And they got caught by the St. Louis team, now coached by former Bruin coach Montgomery there. So St. Louis has had some new life with him there. So you can kind of explain all those losses for Winnipeg. Just not easy, reaching the end of the road trip, facing all these tough teams. And then the return home spot, usually a distracted spot. So now going back out on the road, I think it's actually going to help Winnipeg focus here. So I actually like the Winnipeg side here. I'm not going to play it, but I don't understand why the market looks so against it. And Buffalo, they're coming off a game 2 nights ago where they had Colorado on the ropes, man. Buffalo was winning this game 4-0 at the end of the first period, 4-2 in the third period, and they blew it and lost. That could have been a big win for Buffalo, and instead they totally imploded there. So I would only look to the Winnipeg side in this one. I just don't understand the market read there. I like Tampa Bay as well. But you would have to lay puck line on this. If you wanted to play Tampa Bay, that's how I would recommend doing this. Minus 1.5 on the puck line. They're down from minus 273 to minus 257. You can lay minus 1.5 goals at like minus 105 or something like that, though, and make it like a spread bet. They do have 85% of tickets, 91% of the cash on them, even though the line looks like it's moved down on them a little bit. I think San Jose is in a spot where they're probably not going to have the greatest game, in my opinion. They've been playing better, for sure. I mean, San Jose looked like the worst team in hockey for a while, and they've really turned it on. But look what they're coming off of, man. They won a home-and-home, sweeping Seattle, and then went out to the East Coast, and they were able to beat Washington in overtime. Now they play Tampa, and I know Tampa is also a good team, but look at what it's surrounded by. Washington in overtime, a nice win, and then Florida, Carolina up after this. If you're going to overlook one of these teams or not have your best game in one of these games, it's going to be the Tampa game, as they're closer to 500. Washington, Florida. Florida's the returning champs. Washington, really good record. Carolina, really good record. So I think it's a spot to play Tampa in this one. That would be my opinion if I was going to play this. Tampa, they're coming off a fairly big game as well, where they lost to Toronto, but they have extra rest, too. They've been off since November 30th, since Saturday. So extra rest probably is going to help Tampa, and I think they probably will want to get this game before they have to go out on the road. So that's the way I look at that. I would only look to the Tampa side in that one. Colorado is at Carolina. That's a big game. Carolina up from minus 145 to minus 152, 90% of tickets. 100% of the cash. That cash percentage I don't think is right, although it does look like maybe the money is coming in on that side, but I don't know about that because Colorado's coming off that escape against Buffalo, and yeah, they had to put in an extra effort to do it, but that was kind of a sandwich spot really between Dallas, Edmonton, well, actually Florida, Tampa, Vegas, Dallas, Edmonton. They played a bunch of big games in a row and then had to go out to start the road trip against Buffalo. Maybe they kind of got caught at least early in that game. They were able to win the game anyway. Looks like they had Wedgwood in net. I guess, did Wedgwood get traded from the Blues? Like, what's going on here? Maybe. But he is obviously not their better goalie here, so they also did not have their better goaltender in net for that one. So I would almost be looking for Colorado to maybe play a better game in this one. And maybe they got caught in that Buffalo game, sandwiched in between bigger games. Carolina, I mean, they're playing pretty well recently, but they did lose to Seattle coming off the 2 losses to Florida. Maybe they were in a hangover spot after that. I kind of expected them to bounce back because that second loss was so ugly to Florida, but they did not do that. So Carolina could also be in a bounce back spot coming off that loss to Seattle. That's pretty ugly too. So I'm expecting focus from both teams in that one. Jay Forte, what's up? I'll talk about that game more on my NFL show, which is going to be Saturday night. Usually that's the Monday night game. Lean to the Cowboys plus the points in that one. I can offer more analysis once I get to it, but the Bengals, they just don't play defense, man. I don't want to lay points with the Bengals, who kind of are a dead team now. Bengals are also coming off that tough physical game, big division game against Pittsburgh that they wound up losing. I don't like the spot, the way it sets up for the Bengals in that one, man. And the Cowboys have extra rest coming off Thanksgiving, which was just kind of an easy win for them, even though it was Thanksgiving, which you could argue that's a big game. But against the Giants, how big is it really when it's a bad opponent that you always beat? So I think it sets up much nicer for the Cowboys in that one. That's the way I would look in that game. Take the points with the Cowboys. Now that I kind of think about it in my mind more, it's kind of making me want to take the Cowboys, like for real, like make it a bet, but I don't know if I'm actually going to do that. All right, my plays here. Actually, I was going to talk about this Florida game real quick. Or no, I wasn't. Yeah, Florida, I mean, they beat Carolina, then they had a letdown against Pittsburgh. So after beating Carolina twice, I think they just got caught against Pittsburgh. So maybe they will actually bounce back in this game against the Flyers. Flyers just beat the Rangers and did not have a letdown in what should have been a sandwich spot here. And I think I might have lost on that game, actually. Maybe, because that's a sandwich spot there for sure. They still wound up beating St. Louis. And then, or no, I didn't play that game. I think St. Louis was also in a bad spot. But it looked like a better spot, actually, for St. Louis there. But Flyers were still able to do it. So I don't know if I would really want to try to play the Flyers in this one. But Florida up from minus 160 to minus 165, 50% of the tickets, 86% of the cash on Philadelphia, though. So the market percentages do look to be heavily indicating on the Philadelphia side. And speaking about market indicators not agreeing with me, my plays, that is certainly the case. Islanders minus 128. I know I'm playing the Islanders again. They let me down the last time I played them. They were in a good spot. They had a 4-2 lead, man, in the third period against Washington, and they lost in overtime. Let's not have that happen again. I mean, the Islanders are playing a worse team this time than Washington. They're playing Seattle, and I think this is a good spot to catch Seattle. Islanders sitting at minus 130. I see minus 128 out there as the best price right now. 60% of the tickets and 82% of the cash on Seattle. I am not quite sure that I buy that. I'm hoping to see these percentages shift throughout the day, because sometimes in the morning you just haven't seen them fully form yet. So doing this in the morning is a little bit more difficult because sometimes the market information isn't that good. But look what Seattle did, man. They came off those bad losses to San Jose, back-to-back losses, and losing to Anaheim before that. They went to Carolina to start this road trip, and they beat Carolina. I mean, come on, man. That's a huge win over Carolina. And now you have to go and play the Islanders, and tomorrow you get the New Jersey Devils, who are playing really well. You get the New York Rangers, who won the President's Trophy last year. Then you're going to come back home and face Florida, the returning champs. Boston, who's starting to play a bit better with their new coach there, Joe Sacco, not Joe Flacco. And then Tampa Bay. I mean, if you're going to overlook one team in this entire stretch, who's the lesser of all these teams that you're playing here? It's going to be the Islanders, man. So I think this is a bad spot for them, even though they were pretty well rested coming into that Carolina game. Having to turn around off of that big win like that, I don't like it, and I think they might be looking ahead to these bigger games that are coming up right after this. The Islanders have not been playing that well, so they're pretty easy to overlook. Again, just like last year, the Islanders just lose in overtime constantly. So that is the risk that you're taking with the Islanders, just like they did to me in this Washington game. They might lose in overtime. They lost so many overtime games last year, and they're doing it again this year. But look at what they're coming off of, man. They also played 2 days ago, and they lost in overtime to Montreal. That is a pretty disgusting loss. Montreal, one of the worst teams in hockey. They're worse than the Islanders are. That's a bad loss. I think the Islanders are going to bounce back from that, man. That would be my opinion. I think Seattle is in the much worse spot here. I think it's a sandwich spot. I think it's a spot for the Islanders to try to turn some things around here after an ugly, ugly loss to an inferior team. So give me the Islanders in that one. And then my other plays going against the market read even further with the Calgary Flames. I know these are probably the two teams I've played the most out of all the hockey teams, and I'm going back to the well, playing them again, even though Calgary looks like they have reverse line movement against them, down from minus 130 to minus 126. 62% of the tickets on them, 80% of the cash on the other side on St. Louis. I don't get it. I don't get what I'm seeing in the market at all because my situational read says you got to take Calgary here. And maybe you can get a better price than minus 130 right now. I'm not sure. I'd have to look. But look at the Blues, man. I mean, yeah, they've been playing way better with Montgomery there. I mean, when you get that new coach in, it's a spark. They beat the Rangers to start it. I won on that game. I played the fired coach spot there. They beat New Jersey. Then they returned home, and it was a bad spot, man. That's a letdown spot coming off a couple of big wins. It's a return home spot. You tend to be a little bit distracted, and you have another big opponent up next. So they got caught. They lost to Philadelphia. But like I said, that was also a bad spot for Philadelphia. I thought it was actually an even worse spot for Philadelphia. I pointed that out on my show. I said I couldn't take the Blues in that one because it was a bad spot. They did lose. Both teams were in terrible spots there. Blues lost in overtime. So weird that they lost to the worst team that they played since they fired their coach. They've beaten very good teams and then lost to the worst team they played. So that means they should lose to Calgary, right? Because they're losing to the lesser teams and beating the better teams. So look at what they're off of, man. After that Philadelphia game, they went out on the road again to start this road trip, and they beat the Winnipeg Jets 4-1. And it was not even with Binnington in net. It was with Hoffer in net, who's their worst goalie. So it doesn't mean Binnington's going to be back in net here. But, I mean, he hasn't been like the greatest this year. So I don't know. I'm not too concerned by that. I think it's a letdown spot either way, coming off of Winnipeg. And who do they have up next after Calgary, who's kind of a middling team? They got Edmonton, the Western Conference champs. Then they got Vancouver, who both have better records than Calgary. So I think they might overlook Calgary here, man. I think it's a bad spot for the Blues coming off of that. I'm going to finally expect them to slide a little bit. That eventually that spark from the new coach has to at least fade a little bit, man. I think it might happen here. Calgary, they're in a spot where they returned home in their previous game, which usually it's a bad spot when you return home because you have to get back to home life. It tends to be a little bit of a distraction. They did have extra days off, although sometimes that helps you settle into home life more and becomes more of a distraction. But they beat Columbus anyway. Columbus, not a great team. They're playing a little bit better as of late, but Calgary may have been focused because they had just lost to Columbus on the road. So they beat Columbus, and that broke their loss streak, man. So I think that's important. Calgary had lost to some not great teams there, and I think that win is going to help propel them forward. So I don't really think they're going to be looking ahead to Dallas here. I mean, St. Louis has been playing well recently. I think Calgary wants to still show up for this game, man. So I think they're in the better spot. I think that Columbus win is going to help break their losing momentum there. So I like the Calgary side in that one. NBA. Let's move over to NBA, and then I got to talk about NFL before I get out of here. There's not a whole lot to talk about in the NBA. Nuggets-Cavs is the one really big game, and I'm not playing this game. Cavs are sitting at 4 with 75% of tickets, 87% of the cash. I mean, the 4, it almost in a way looks too easy to take Cleveland, so the public is only going to come in on the Cleveland side, but it does, look like the cash is also coming in on the Cleveland side, so I would probably still lean that way. I mean, Cleveland did not have a letdown after beating Boston. They still easily beat Washington, who's probably the worst team in the NBA. Now they get Denver, who's probably going to draw their focus a little bit more, so I expect Cleveland will continue to show up here. I expect them to win this game. They're coming off an easy game. Denver is coming off a game where they beat Golden State. So they might actually consider that to be a bigger game because it was a big conference game there. But they are starting a road trip, so they should still be focused here as well. But they might run out of energy a little bit more than Cleveland does because they're playing two big games in a row, whereas Cleveland is not because they had that Washington game in there to kind of get some reprieve. So I think Cleveland is in the slightly better spot there. My actual play in the NBA. Oh, and I will point out, by the way, the Rockets up from -1.5 to -4 on the road at Golden State. I know that looks like a really suspicious line, even though the Rockets have been playing well. The Rockets are coming off that loss to the Sacramento Kings, where I played the Sacramento Kings. I thought it was a bad spot for the Rockets, sandwiched in there between Oklahoma City, I think they had beaten, and then this game against Golden State. So that was a bad spot. Rockets maybe in a bounce-back spot, and Golden State's coming off that tough loss to Denver, I believe, as we just saw there. So Golden State probably is indeed in the worst spot there. But this line being 4, obviously, I'm like, why is it 4? Got to be injuries? Yeah, that's true. Well, injuries or kind of like a rest game here. So the Warriors are actually resting Curry in this game. He played in the last game. And I believe that Draymond Green is like still out, I guess. So, but the main factor is Curry here. So that's why the line is where it is. Curry is not going to play in this game, but it's going to be his first game out. He's getting like a rest game. So does that mean the Warriors are going to step up their game a little bit in this one? It might. So that's what's going on in that game, just to explain that line. The game I'm actually going to play is the Sacramento Kings. I'm going right back to them and playing them 2 games in a row. Usually you will not see me on the same team 2 games in a row, but I think the spot just lines up nicely for the Kings 2 games in a row. Grizzlies are sitting at 3.5 now everywhere. 3.5 I think is still fine to take on the Kings. Grizzlies very public with the way they've been playing recently. They're a good team, man. They got a good defense. They're looking good. 78% of tickets on them, but 64% of the cash on the other side of the Kings. I think the Kings are being a little bit overlooked right now, man. And they are coming off that nice win over Houston. So that is the one maybe slight concern here, but I'm not too concerned by it because I think the Kings are going to still continue to be focused here as they are still below 500 and they're starting a road trip here. So they're going to want to still show up focused to start the road trip, man. And this is the bigger game of these 2 games in the back-to-back here. Memphis should be the team that's going to draw more focus than San Antonio, even though San Antonio does have Wemba. Memphis has been playing real well. So Sacramento, yeah, they're coming off that win over Houston, but I think that win was good to kind of break their momentum. And I know, yeah, they did lose to San Antonio, so maybe they want revenge against them, whatever. But I still think they're going to be focused to start the road trip. Focused on Memphis here, and they won that last game against Houston. So even though that was a pretty decent win, a big win, I think that they can't really afford to overlook many teams, and they're still going to be focused coming off of that to start the road trip. It does tend to be a focus spot, and even more so when you're coming off a win at home, although I would prefer it if it was like a lesser win, though, one that just kind of helps you get some momentum. But that win should still kind of help their momentum, in my opinion. But Memphis is the team that's really in the fade spot here. Like I said, they're coming off a tough game against Dallas, and they lost a long win streak there. They'd won 6 games in a row, although a lot of it was against bad teams. Philly, who's basically a shell of a team. Chicago, Portland, Detroit, New Orleans, who's massively injured, and Indiana hasn't been playing well either, so they didn't really beat anybody good in that whole stretch. So maybe Memphis isn't quite as good as we think they are right now, though they have been playing pretty well in general. They went on the road to Dallas, and that broke their loss streak, and it was a close game, and Memphis had the lead for almost all of the second half, man. They were winning by double digits in the fourth quarter, and they were winning for almost the entire fourth quarter, and they blew the game right at the end against last year's conference champs. That's a bad loss to take, man. Not bad as in it looks bad on your resume, but tough loss to bounce back from, man. You go all out to try to beat Dallas in that one weird road game like that. And not only that, but it ends your winning momentum like that. That is a bad situation to be in coming off of that, man. I think it's a hangover spot that might have been a momentum killer as well. They have to face Sacramento, who's below 500. And who do they have up next to start this 2-game road trip? Oh, yeah, the other conference champs from last year and NBA champs from last year, the Boston Celtics. This is a mega sandwich spot if you think teams step it up additionally for the conference winners from last year. This game is sandwiched in between both of them, and it's a single home game from Memphis sandwiched in between the two. It looks like a bad spot to me for Memphis, man. I think it's a sandwich spot. So give me the points with the Sacramento Kings. And now I'm going to talk about the NFL before I get out of here. Kind of a lot to say about this game. This is a game that's really messing with me. It's Packers-Lions tonight. I think this game might have actually gotten flexed into the Thursday night game because I think it was going to be, I forget, I think it was going to be one of these other games, but I don't know. Packers-Lions, at least we do get a good Thursday night game. And by the way, Thursday night games, I know I lost on Miami last week, so my Thursday night betting record is now 2-1 and 10-3 overall in the leans on Thursday night, so still has been good. Looking at this game, Lions look like they opened 6. I'm not sure if they actually did or if that was like a look-ahead number because I've seen like 3.5 all week, basically. They've just been sitting at 3.5. Packers got 52% of the tickets, 50% of the cash, evenly split, though. Interesting. So the quick market read looks to be slightly on the Lions. Total sitting at 51.5 with 85% of tickets and 88% of the cash on the over in this one. The over might make sense in this one as well because these teams, when they played a few weeks back in Green Bay, it was bad weather that kind of affected the offense. So if you expect another low-scoring game just based off of that, maybe that's not the way to really look here, although the public is still not really going to be persuaded by that argument, really. They're still coming in on the over here. They're not going to pay that much attention to that game. They like how this sets up the Lions, one of the best offenses in football against Jordan Love. 2 offenses that look like they can score. You're not going to find me trying to play an under in this game, though, either way. So I'd probably lean to the Lions side just slightly, but there's a lot kind of involved here. Both teams are coming off Thursday games, so both teams have a full week's rest, basically. Green Bay just beat Miami, so both of these games were primetime games on Thanksgiving, so everybody saw what happened. Green Bay had an easy win over Miami, unfortunately for me, because I thought it was a sandwich spot. So, yeah, they're going to go out on the road. They're going to be focused on this game. And, yes, they lost to Detroit at home. And you know I always say that when you have a team that lost the first matchup of a divisional home and home during the season, if the home team lost the first game and they're an underdog on the road in the next game, that tends to be the way you want to look generally. You want to take the points with that road team the next time if they lost at home because they want to repay the favor, and it adds a little bit of extra motivation there. Although, do these teams really need extra motivation? I think both teams are going to be motivated here. This is a big divisional matchup. Green Bay does need the game a little bit more, kind of, because they are behind Detroit in the division standings, although Green Bay is going to make the playoffs anyway, in my opinion. I don't think they're going to miss the playoffs. I don't think there's any danger of that, although Detroit kind of needs the game a little bit less. But Detroit, they played the earlier game on Thanksgiving, and they did not come out of there with an easy win there. They actually were blowing Chicago out in this game. Detroit should have won this game more easily. I mean, they outgained them by 100 yards. They were -1 in turnovers. They outpossessed them by almost 11 minutes. They out first down them by 8. But in the first half of this game, Detroit had like 300 yards of offense to Chicago having like less than 100. Chicago only had 2 first downs in the entire first half. So Detroit was blowing them away, and they only had a 16-0 lead at halftime. And it should have been way more than that with the way Detroit dominated the first half. This game was nowhere near as close as it looked, to be honest, but it got close near the end, and everybody saw what happened. Chicago got back in the game, and they had a chance to get into field goal range in a domed stadium for a tying field goal to try to send it into overtime. And Eberflus, their coach, he's not Caleb Williams, their coach. I don't know what he was thinking. They had a timeout still to use, and they didn't use it, and the clock ran out on them. It was very bizarre. Didn't make sense. I don't know if it was another one of those weird, like the league is going to rig this thing type of thing. I don't know, because how can the league like get a coach to do that and like screw his own team over? I don't really think that's what happened, but I don't really know. I don't know how you can explain why Eberflus did not call a timeout if he just thought he didn't have any left. I don't know what that was. But that was the difference in the Bears attempting a game-time field goal or not at the end there. And Eberflus got fired for doing that. So I'll talk about that more when I have my NFL show. But the Lions, I think because that game was such a close call, I think the Lions are going to be in kind of a bounce-back spot for that reason. And this game actually looks very similar to the Chargers-Chiefs game on Sunday night, which I'm going to get to in my NFL show. The market read looks similar to it. It's a situation where the line is actually different. It's actually more significantly different in the Chiefs game, but the line looks like it's so different from the first matchup between these two that it's like, what the hell is going on here? It looks like there is now actually value on the home team in both these games, and in both cases, the home team is coming off a close call against an inferior division opponent, so that all has me leaning to the Lions a little bit in this game as well, and to the Chiefs, by the way, which I'll talk about more when I do my NFL video. I don't know if I actually want to play that game. I'm not going to play this game. Chiefs, a little bit more drastic, because the other thing that I just pointed out was, what was the line when the Lions played at Green Bay a few weeks ago? Oh, yeah. The Lions were -3.5 on the road, and now they're -3.5 at home. So what gives? What has changed since then? I know the Lions lost Anzalone. They do have those defensive injuries. Hutchinson, I think, was already injured when they played the Packers. So Anzalone, he's not alone going to move the line like 6 points. It doesn't make any sense. I think this line has moved too much. And in the Chiefs game, by the way, it's even more dramatic. The Chiefs only at 4, and they were a 7-point road favorite against the Chargers. So very strange line movement here. So the Lions, if that 3.5 on the road was right, which I don't think it was, because the Packers did actually completely outgain the Lions in that game. The Packers threw a pick 6 in that game that really hurt them. Packers outgained the Lions by like 100 yards in that game. So the Packers did outplay them, but now this game is at Detroit. So I don't know if I'm going to put that much stock in that. It was a misleading final result, though. At the very least, the Packers did play better than that. So yeah, the Lions should not have been a 3.5-point favorite on the road. But should they only be a 3.5-point favorite at home now? I don't think so. The 3.5 spread on the road would indicate that the line in this game should probably be like close to 9.5. But obviously the odds makers can't really do that because all the money would come in on Green Bay. I mean, that would obviously be way too high. So they can't do that. But I think this line should be somewhere in the middle. I think a fair line is probably closer to like 5 or 6 on this game for the Lions. I mean, this line being at 3.5 is giving the Lions like basically just home field and not a whole lot else. And I think the Lions are the better team by a little bit more than that. Excuse me. I think it's just recency bias because the Packers have looked like the way better team. I think the Packers have looked really good in the last few games, I should say, and the Lions didn't look good on a national TV audience on Thanksgiving. So that's how I look at that game. Lean to the Lions slightly, laying the 3.5. That's going to do it for me, man. So once again, my plays: college basketball, Penn State -2, Samford -7.5, UC Davis -2.5. I think we do have market agreement on all of those. Hockey, we do not, but I still like the situations. Islanders -128, Calgary -130, and NBA Sacramento Kings again +4. That's going to do it for me. Tower Gang Toad on Twitter. Follow the Tower Gang podcast. We had another ridiculous episode last night. Go check that out. And patreon.com/Tower Gang. You get live pre-show, post-show. Hang out with us in a Telegram. Bonus content, baby. Tower Gang. Have a good one. Let's get back on the winning track here, man. End the slump. Let's let it not continue. Peace.